Welcome back. Former President Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to protest this week, saying he will be arrested on Tuesday for his alleged role in hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels. Trump denies his involvement. I want to bring in our panel this morning. Courtney Subramanian is in the White House reporter, is a White House reporter with the LA Times, and Daniel Lippman is the White House reporter with Politico. Welcome to both of you. A lot of people talking about this yesterday when the announcement was made, came across this Truth Social platform. What do you make of this? I'll start with you, Courtney.
Well, I think it's important to remember that he's already spoken to this earlier this month at CPAC. He said that he actually thinks he would do better if he was indicted or convicted. And I think he's not wrong. If you look at polling after the feds raided Mar-a-Lago this past summer, and after his first and second impeachments, he actually got a boost among Republican voters. So, you know, I think you'll see Republicans rally around the former president. Of course, we've obviously never had a former president indicted, but this could actually serve to benefit the Republicans as they, you know, try and figure out who they're going to nominate. And with Biden, actually, I think the Democrats would certainly use this. If the president decides to run as he's expected to, it would be taking another page from the 2020 playbook, which is a vote for Biden is a vote against Donald Trump.
Daniel, what do you make of it?
Well, yeah, it seems like, you know, he has for decades skated close to the law. You know, he and his dad were investigated for discrimination in housing projects, housing developments in the 70s. And he has more than 4,000 lawsuits. He's threatened lawsuits against everyone. He hasn't paid a lot of his contractor bills over the years. But I think it's interesting to see how the Republican candidates are reacting. You saw Mike Pence last week at the Gridiron Dinner criticize him, throw him under the bus, saying what he did on January 6th was a disgrace. And yesterday he was talking about how this was a kind of a political witch hunt. And you see with Ron DeSantis, he was quiet in the last day or two as this indictment is building. And so he might want to capitalize on this against Trump, his top rival.
We're certainly to see this play out as we continue to talk about it, and certainly seeing what's going to happen on Tuesday if, in fact, an indictment does come down. Let's talk about Biden. He has a lot on his plate. We're talking about the China-Russia relations, the banking crisis. What happens this week, Courtney?
Well, I think the banking crisis was the first big political test for Biden as he considers 2024. They are very concerned about looking as if they're bailing out wealthy executives, which is why you saw the president come out and call on Congress to impose tougher sanctions on bank executives who are responsible for failures, which is why you saw him talk about you know, the backstop being, you know, helping out small businesses, you know, make payroll, and that the backstop was not funded by federal taxpayers. So this is something that I think you'll see the president really double down on the blue-collar voter messaging. And this week, he's hosting a healthcare anniversary event. So I think you're going to really see him you know, push some of that messaging that we expect in 2024.
What do you expect from Biden when it comes to the China-Russia front? You know, that meeting's supposed to happen this week. The ICC with the charges against Putin. Where does Biden go from here? What does he say that would make an impact, if at all?
Well, I think he's still trying to respond to the invasion by making sure that there's enough aid that's going to the Ukrainians. You have polls that say a majority of Republicans are against further aid. They're in the more isolationist camp. You had Ron DeSantis tell Tucker Carlson, who's probably the most powerful Republican in media these days, that it was a territorial dispute, which he got criticized by Nikki Haley and by Mike Pence for saying that. And so I think Biden wants to keep the pressure on and make sure that Ukraine doesn't lose, but he also doesn't want to get in a wider war with Russia, given you had that drone incident a couple days ago.
We're ping-ponging here. I want to skip and talk about TikTok and moves here to ban it. What happens, Courtney?
Well, I think it comes down to whether this administration can prove that it actually poses a national security threat, which, you know, you have to remember that the Trump administration 3 years ago tried a similar effort that was blocked in courts. And so the DOJ investigation into TikTok and whether there was surveillance of journalists is a step in that direction. National security spokesman John Kirby pointed out this week that the ban on federal devices underscores the threat of national security. So I think we have to see if that's something that this administration can prove.
And what's your take on that?
Well, I think they're facing an uphill battle because they're doing something with more structure and processes, unlike the Trump administration, which had, they had different committees that were looking at it and trying to ban it. But it comes down to often free speech issues, which is unless they can prove that China is vacuuming up this data, then it's going to be hard for, courts are going to look at this very skeptically and say, hey, we still have the First Amendment here, and you can't get rid of foreign apps just because it increases a government's influence.
And I was just saying, the public's appetite. I mean, the public loves TikTok, so how exactly are you going to push something like this through when the public is saying, hey, we like our TikTok. Don't mess with my dancing videos here, or whatever you want to have. Where do you go with that in our last 45 seconds here? And either one of you can take that.
No, I think it's hard because if there was just an app that only a few people used, then you would have had it'd be much easier. But this is one of the most popular social media apps in the country, and the Biden administration uses it to reach a lot of their young voters, and so they have to be aware of that. And so it seems like a performative ritual where they know that courts are probably going to strike this down.
I'll give you the last 20 seconds.
Well, I would just note that it certainly makes for good politics. This is a bipartisan issue. It fits with the Biden administration's economic competition with China message. So I don't think they'll be backing down anytime soon.
All right, Courtney with the LA Times and Daniel with Political. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate both of you.